Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage and it really doesn't happen that often that I'm absolutely baffled by what I'm watching right now. But watching Andy Muschietti's The Flash was such an experience. This is such a bizarre train wreck that it's almost impossible for me to wrap my head around how any of this might work for anyone. Coming right after the masterpiece that is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, it comes across as even worse. The story, which is influenced by the popular comic book storyline Flashpoint, is about Barry Allen, aka The Flash, played again by Ezra Miller, who finds out that he's not just super fast, but actually faster than the speed of light, which allows him to travel back in time. Which, against the advice of Ben Affleck's Batman, he does in an attempt to save his family. Of course, things go horribly wrong. He gets stuck in a past in which he now has to deal with a younger and way more obnoxious version of himself, and also the arrival of General Zod, again played by the usually great Michael Shannon, who unfortunately has really nothing to do here. And yes, that's General Zod from Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which celebrates its 10-year anniversary and which retroactively became the start for the extremely mixed bag that is the DC Extended Universe, which now is also on its last legs. The only two left still coming out are Blue Beetle in August and then Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom at the end of the year, before a new DC film division will rise under the new leadership of James Gunn. The Flash very much feels like a movie or a corporate product that recycles what came before, that uses the leftovers and incorporates them into its own lukewarm attempt of a multiverse movie. Which is of course totally fair game and absolutely in line with the character's comic history and the already mentioned Flashpoint source material. Though this one actually doesn't feel so much like a full-fledged multiverse movie and more like a time travel action comedy or alternate reality adventure. The big multiverse shenanigans and unfortunately really laughable or more so tired and embarrassing references only really come into play at the very end. But back to the beginning. Right from the get-go, The Flash feels kind of off. The humor is way more missed than hit and the tone is really all over the place. The early action in Gotham City at least feels palpable, and I was very happy that for once it is set in an actual place with actual other human beings being around. Unlike the big finale, which once again just takes place in some remote desert, so that our superheroes can fight some CGI baddies without any real impact. But that first big action set piece was decent, and seeing Batman chase some gangster through the streets of Gotham and being able to clearly see what's going on action-wise is nice. But as I said, the tone or tonal shifts are very bizarre. Because then we also get a sequence that had me sit in absolute disbelief in the theater. Something so cartoonish that I couldn't believe this was for real. Remember those awesome and over-the-top sequences in the X-Men movies that showed just how amazing Quicksilver's powers are? There's something similar here, in which Barry is rescuing a bunch of babies that are all in mid-air flying out of a skyscraper. Now, on one hand, I kind of appreciate the movie's willingness to get really crazy. There's a certain Looney Tunes vibe to what's going on here. But I think they really overdo it. And it certainly doesn't help a bit that the effects of this movie can look absolutely horrible. These CGI babies look ghoulish. And it's also that clash of tones that happens again and again in this movie. But speaking about the effects some more. First, a positive. I really like the initial introduction to Barry's speed, how he's just flying through the streets and everything becomes a beam of light. It's cool looking. But when he's running so fast that he's entering that certain speed force realm in which he sees different moments in time, all, and I really mean all of the faces of the people there look absolutely horrible. And I really don't know why, but it really does look like a bad video game and it's ugly as hell. But the optics aside, even though there might be a lot more to say about it, but the story and characters also don't really work. You could certainly nitpick this movie to death, but it's also just the basic elements. Time travel movies always have certain hurdles to overcome. Their rules seldom make a lot of sense and that can be okay. How the Flash becomes a very simple time machine is kind of stupid to me, but I can live with that. I also have to say that I found it rather hilarious and nice how Batman explains the whole time travel multiverse stuff with a big bowl of pasta. But when the movie basically hangs a lantern on it and itself calls it all a hot mess, it only helps so much because it still remains a hot mess. And I felt the movie is doing this in many regards. When Barry meets his younger self in the past, there's some potential there for some cool banter. But at least to me, they really did their best to make this younger Barry as obnoxious and unlikable as possible. And then it doesn't really help that he himself says he knows he's obnoxious. Or when the movie puts a Looney Tunes reference in the background and really unfolds as this overtly wacky affair with people losing their front teeth or throwing up like crazy. The movie isn't afraid to be a crazy, stupid superhero movie. But yeah, it's a crazy and mostly stupid superhero movie. And the comedy is sometimes so out there that it totally clashes with any attempt of being epic or emotional as well. Even with the jokes that made me laugh, I'm not sure if they really fit in there. At least there was a nice Back to the Future deep cut, but then again they totally destroy that by keep repeating the same thing again and again. As far as the emotional beats go, they didn't land for me. The whole story about Barry's mother didn't click for me, and maybe it's because of all the stuff that surrounds it, or that it's really the most generic familiar material and it's not really done in any kind of new or fresh way. Then they of course try to give you those nostalgic emotional beats. Not just dangle some member Barrys in front of your eyes, but bringing back Michael Keaton himself as Batman. His introduction is pretty neat, and Keaton also doesn't just phone it in, but still has that certain charisma. But the material he's been given is really nothing to work with at all. Making him say lines again like, "Then let's get nuts," just feels pathetic. There's also no real character arc there. Of course, there's that connection about loss, in specific losing your parents and having to deal with that, but there's no real payoff here, except the cheap nostalgia. Sure, I absolutely love Danny Elfman's Batman theme, but hearing it in this kind of movie feels so hollow. And as you might know, I'm certainly not against these kind of multiverse movies, and they oftentimes incorporate a lot of nostalgia as well, if they are untitled Everything Everywhere All at Once, but there are ways to do that, and this is not it. There's also just something that just feels wrong about Michael Keaton's or Tim Burton's version of Batman trying to be a legit character in this kind of movie world. Seeing this noir-like Batman being part of an action scene in broad daylight in the middle of a desert, it just doesn't sit right. Again, it's also about that clash of tones. In general, making Zod the main antagonist again and drawing a line from the very serious and heavy Man of Steel to this oddball of a movie, it's not working for me. It presents you a fun little power moment with two Flashes kicking some ass while playing an upbeat pop song, and right after that gives us a line about a dead infant. What's going on here? And then in the last 15 to 20 minutes the movie completely loses it and becomes this utterly ugly piece of superhero nostalgia nonsense. And it's not just ugly and cringeworthy, but it also doesn't work well in terms of the story and characters. I don't want to spoil anything, but if you begin to question the things in the movie, I think it falls apart even more. It's almost fascinating that the movie argues for accepting the past as it is and letting it go while simultaneously trying to be this big and fun nostalgia fest. It's like it's arguing against its own existence. Now, to the movie's defense, though it's hard to frame it like that, but I didn't really feel miserable or bored while watching it, because it's just such a train wreck that I was dumbfounded and almost fascinated by it. And when it ends with an after-credits scene that's again so gross in a way, I can't help but feel it's really making fun of itself and putting a light on just how ridiculous and shitty this all is. So in German I'd say, The Flash ist solch ein inkohärentes und zuweilen absolut hässliches Desaster, dass es fast schon wieder Spaß macht. Aber leider nur fast. I give The Flash 4 out of 10. It's more like 4.4, but I don't do that.
Exact.
Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about The Flash. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd and also on Patreon, simply at TheJimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this review, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.